FBI files on Sinatra were opened today through the Freedom of Information Act. What they reveal is a colorful, extensive, and often surprising history of surveillance by the Bureau of one of our country's biggest stars.
The FBI did not hand out 2,403 pages unless somebody was making a lot of people nervous. Frank Sinatra was not just a singer, he was swagger, scandal, politics, nightlife, and raw star power rolled into one sharply tailored suit. To his fans, he was the voice of romance and heartbreak. To his critics, he was a volatile celebrity with dangerous friends and too much influence for comfort. Over the years, federal agents tracked his friendships, his rumors, his political opinions, his family crises, and even the frenzy of his fans. That file was not built on one incident, it was built on decades of suspicion, fascination, and surveillance surrounding one of the most recognizable men in America. And before we get into it, tell us in the comments which side of Sinatra you find more interesting, the smooth entertainer, the public adored, or the hard-edged figure who kept turning up in the company of mobsters, politicians, and federal investigators. By the end, it becomes clear why the FBI ended up with 2,403 pages on Frank Sinatra. The man everyone watched.
The skinny baritone from Hoboken was the darling of what were then called Bobby Soxers when the FBI opened its first file on him. On a tip from J. Edgar Hoover's pal, gossip columnist Walter Winchell, the Bureau chased a false report that Sinatra had bought his way out of the World War II draft.
By the 1940s, Sinatra was already causing a level of public hysteria that made authority figures uneasy. He was not just popular, he inspired screaming crowds, obsessive devotion, and the kind of celebrity mania that older generations often view with suspicion. Incredibly, one of the earliest complaints in his federal file was not about gangsters or politics at all, but about the emotional frenzy surrounding his fans. It tells us something important right away. The government did not begin watching Sinatra because it had proof of some criminal empire. It began watching because he was visible, influential, and controversial enough to attract complaints from all directions. Once a public figure reaches that level, rumors begin piling up around them, whether they deserve it or not. One early cloud over Sinatra involved claims that he had dodged military service during World War II by paying off a doctor. The accusation was serious and damaging, especially at a time when patriotism shaped public image in powerful ways. The FBI looked into it and concluded his exemption for a punctured eardrum and psychological concerns was legitimate. Even so, the rumor never really died. It lingered and hurt him professionally, especially in the late 40s when his career hit turbulence. That became part of the broader pattern in Sinatra's life. Even when allegations did not stick, they still followed him. The file kept growing because suspicion around him never fully went away. Mob friends, mob rumors.
What Mooney told my father is that he utilized Frank Sinatra in the capacity of trying to find the right kind of women for various people, and in this particular situation with JFK, to try to get them in a compromising position.
If the draft story put Sinatra on the Bureau's radar, his social circle kept him there. His file reportedly reads like a tour through mid-century organized crime. He denied being part of the mob, but denial only went so far when he was repeatedly seen with some of the most notorious figures in the country. One name that keeps coming up is Sam Giancana, the Chicago mob boss with whom Sinatra was said to be close. Their relationship drew attention not only because of Giancana's criminal stature, but because Sinatra moved in political circles too. Once a celebrity with underworld contacts begins brushing shoulders with presidential campaigns, the story gets much bigger than nightlife gossip. Sinatra was also linked to other mob-associated figures through gifts, appearances, and favors. There were reports of him doing appearances connected to mob families, socializing with Detroit mobsters, and benefiting from underworld pressure and contract disputes. He did not exactly hide these friendships. In fact, he often seemed to treat them as nobody else's business. That openness may have been part of the problem. The Bureau did not need a secret photograph in a dark alley when Sinatra was willing to be seen publicly with men investigators already knew well. Whether he viewed them as personal friends, useful allies, or just part of his world, the effect was the same. Every meeting fed the file. Too big for Hoover.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist.
What makes Sinatra's FBI story especially strange is he was not being watched as a possible friend of gangsters. He was also being watched because of his political views and activism. In a different era, that part of his file might surprise people who only know the tuxedo, the whiskey glass, and the swagger. Sinatra supported anti-racist causes and defended people caught up in the anti-communist panic of the era. He was also involved with liberal causes that made suspicious officials pay attention. In the feverish atmosphere of the Red Scare, that was sometimes enough to draw scrutiny even if no actual crime had been committed. So Sinatra ended up in a very unusual position. To some people, he looked like a dangerous man because he knew mobsters. To others, he looked politically suspicious because he defended civil liberties and pushed back against blacklisting. He was a conservative symbol to some, a liberal nuisance to others, and a headache to federal authorities either way. That helps explain why the file became so enormous. Sinatra was never just one thing. He crossed too many worlds at once. He sang to adoring crowds, campaigned around political power, drank with rough company, and spoke out on issues that made watchdogs tense. Hoover's FBI loved tidy categories. Sinatra was the opposite of tidy. The informant that wasn't.
From what you've said to us, I would conclude that it would be your testimony that you received then no illegal money from any means.
I have never in my life, sir, received any illegal monies.
Okay. And you
I've had
did
to
not
work very hard for my money. Thank you.
One of the strangest moments in the whole saga came when Sinatra, through an associate, reportedly offered his services as an informant to J. Edgar Hoover. It sounds like the start of a movie plot. But according to the account, the FBI wanted nothing to do with it. This suggests Sinatra knew exactly how much suspicion surrounded him. He understood the rumors, understood the danger of being seen as mob adjacent, and may have thought cooperation could protect him. If the Bureau accepted him as useful, perhaps it would also see him as clean. Instead, Hoover's side reportedly brushed him off with open contempt. The message was essentially that they did not want Sinatra anywhere near them in that role. That rejection says a lot about how he was viewed. He was too famous, too messy, too compromised, or maybe just too unpredictable to be trusted. So the relationship stayed what it had long been, one-sided and watchful. Sinatra could not charm his way out of federal suspicion the way he could disarm a nightclub crowd. The Bureau kept its distance while keeping its eyes on him, and the file continued to swell. The kidnapping that changed the file.
The FBI locates the San Fernando Valley hideout where the kidnappers of Frank Sinatra Jr. held him for 2 days, and dramatically the case is broken wide open. The FBI conducted its investigation in complete secrecy. 5 days of swift and effective detective work.
Not every page in Sinatra's file was about suspected wrongdoing. Some of the most dramatic material came from a moment when he and his family were the victims. In December 1963, his son, Frank Sinatra Jr., was kidnapped, turning one of America's most famous entertainers into a desperate father caught in a nightmare. The FBI quickly became deeply involved. Agents advised Sinatra to wait for the ransom demand, pay it, and let them trace the money. He followed that guidance, and when the kidnappers demanded $240,000, he was even willing to offer more. It was a staggering episode that mixed fear, publicity, and procedural precision. The Bureau recorded serial numbers on the ransom money and used that trail to help identify the men responsible. Sinatra Jr. was released, the kidnappers were soon arrested, and the crime became one of the most infamous celebrity kidnappings in American history. For the FBI, this was one case where Sinatra was not the subject of suspicion so much as the center of a national emergency. Even that chapter, though, added to the mythic size of the file. By then, Sinatra was so famous, so connected, and so combustible a public figure that every crisis around him grew into something larger. That's really the answer to the 2,403 pages. Sinatra was not watched for one reason. He was watched because he lived at the crossroads of fame, power, scandal, crime, rumors, politics, and public obsession for decades. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think the FBI had a good reason to keep such a massive file on Frank Sinatra? Let us know in the comments section below.